You are live. You got 2 minutes.
All right, welcome to our second Finance Committee meeting of the year. We have quite a full agenda today. We're going to talk about, let's see if I can get this done. We're going to talk about changes to the fiscal 2019-2020 revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are some changes that we do know today. We're going to talk about current fiscal year end projects. Although we're still receiving quotes and we don't have final numbers from the state, we won't get those until June 9th. So it might be as late as August before we know if we can do some of these projects. The board will have on their agenda for their regular meeting a resolution concerning this. So we want to make sure that you all are aware of what's going to be put on that. Also, we've got proposed changes to our 2021 approved budget, school board approved budget, due to the changes in appropriations from the city as well as the state funding shortfalls that they've identified for us for next year already. Then we have some other revenue shortfall considerations that we need to talk about, although we do not have solid numbers on this and we will not be reducing these in the budget that we're going to ask the board to adopt or recommend that the board adopt. We do want you to be aware of them because they do affect next year. So changes to current year fiscal revenue. We do know already that March's sales tax is projected lower. Sales tax we receive 2 months after it's collected. So we do know that the March sales tax is approximately 28% lower than expected. So that's $385,000 shortfall. And they're predicting that April through June will be 25% lower, which is $950,000. So our total shortfall for sales tax revenue could be as high as $1,335,000. So that's quite a lot of money that we will not see current year for sales tax if it comes in as projected. In addition to that, the state has suspended the supplementary per pupil payments. So the amount that we've received this year is going to be short by $1,785,987. So we will not, at this point, they're telling us we won't receive that money. They're expecting a shortfall in lottery, and this is where they're not going to send us this money. So the total shortfall for 1920 school year, this school year that ends June 30th, is $3.1 million. So what does that affect? Well, it affects the year-end projects, obviously, things that we normally would do at year-end as part of our year. Restocking things, material supplies, all kinds of stuff like that, plus projects that we do to maintain our buildings and schools. A lot of that won't happen this year. We will not purchase buses, things like that, because we just won't have the money with $3 million gone. So some of the items that have been prioritized by the administration are these tennis courts resurfacing. It's been 12 years that we can find since they've been resurfaced. These courts are in terrible shape and they need to be resurfaced. So we will try to move forward with that as our top priority. The next thing would be painting at Nansman Parkway Elementary and Booker T Elementary schools. We'd like to get a playground at Kilby Shores. Again, none of these are for sure, just these are the things we'd like to do. There's replacement furniture that is desperately needed. We'd like to get some of that. We have a commercial copier for the print shop. We have a copier over there that's over 10 years old. It does not work well. We have several printing presses that are extremely heavy and will require a major lift to get them to the new location in July. And we have found that that's just not cost effective to move those machines, nor is there a guarantee that once we move those machines that are 40 plus years old that they'll actually work for us. So we are considering a copier if funds are available for the print shop that would replace those. We have 2 fire panels that need replacing at those 2 schools. And then we have some repairs to the tracks. This is not resurfacing. This is just simply repairing places that are divots or holes in the track. And again, the school board will see this resolution on May 14th to consider for approval. Any questions on that before I move on?
These are our suggested priorities, right?
Yes, ma'am. Suggested
Okay.
priorities, if in fact funds become available that we can use.
Okay, and if no funds are available, obviously we can't do it.
Absolutely, we cannot do them. And again, we won't know that much before August because of the final sales tax numbers coming in.
Okay.
If you'll recall, we report out to the board in September for the prior year end results of what's happened. So just as normal, we would not know this until August. The board would see the reports and everything in September.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to the school board's approved budget. Obviously, our approved budget had much more money than we're going to actually get, so we had to make some adjustments. The city has proposed an appropriation of 1.5 million. We had asked for 3.9 million, so the difference is 2.44 million. So you can see that's quite a difference that we need to adjust for. In addition, the state made some reductions before they finalized their budget, one of which is they removed the 2% raise for next year, and that was $1.18 million. They removed additional school counselor funding, so they're going to only fund school counselors at current year SOQ, and that was $275,270. They reduced the at-risk funding they had added to it. They reduced that back down, and they took $338,776 from that budget. And they had also added the Virginia pre-K budget, and they've now reduced that back to current year at $270,506. So overall, our budget was approved with an increase of $9.8 million. If we subtract out the $2.4 million the city is going to short fund us and the state funding changes of $1.9 million, that's a total of $4.373364 that will not come to us as the approved budget. So we have remaining funds of $5.4 million. So in other words, we had to cut $4.3 million out of the budget that the school board approved. Once we do that, you can see here what the revenue is going to be. So our new revenue will be $158,412,660, or $5,443,740 more than current year.
Now, could you go back to that slide?
Yes, ma'am.
No, we don't know about federal funds at all, right?
Well, the federal funds here are not what you're thinking. These are not the grant funds. This is things like the JROTC reimbursement, the
is it impact aid?
Impact aid, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
At this point, we're not being told that's going to be impacted at all.
Okay.
So that's why that's the same as the current year, because we're not seeing that portion is going to get impacted at all.
Okay.
So this is only the operating fund. This isn't all funds. This is just the operating fund.
Yes, the operating fund. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
For sources of revenue, you can see here that it shifts just slightly to like almost a 60-40 with state and city, which is about where we normally are. And that just gives you a pictorial of the revenue again in the operating fund. So the changes that we're looking at proposing, and I'm not going to be very specific here because we're still in the process of looking through this, but we believe most of the new positions requested will be removed. We believe that we can move some of our expenses over to the C.A.R.E.S Act, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that has some qualifying items on it. And so we're not going to be able to move a lot over there because most of what it's looking for is equipment kind of things. And we don't have much equipment in our budget to begin with to even move over there. So we've got some things that we've moved over there to make things work, but there's a lot that we can't put over there from the operating fund. The C.A.R.E.S Act truly is going to be supplemental money. Then we're reducing and eliminating equipment replacement that doesn't qualify for the C.A.R.E.S Act. So any equipment that we did have in the proposed and approved budget, most of that has been eliminated because we just can't afford to do it with the money that we're receiving. Other changes, we've reduced raises for staff proportionately. The teacher scale will change. The support scale raise will change. We've delayed some parts of the SPS efficiency and effectiveness plan over to 2021-22. We're looking at cut increases in the non-salary costs requested by departments, things like purchase services, materials and supplies, travel and training, those kinds of things. Wherever we could find areas that we could shave off a little bit here and there to try to get to our 4.3 million, and we've tried to do as much of that strategically as we could do. So any questions on that before I move to the CARES Act? Now, we will be bringing to the school board in June in May 26th, I apologize, May 26th, we'll be bringing a complete listing of everything that we are recommending as changes to this so that the school board can adopt the budget. This is a very important timeline because, as you all know, we have to send contracts out before June 16th. And so we have to get this budget in and adopted and considered and adopted so that we can send the contracts and assignments out to staff and teachers in order to have them back in a timely manner so we'll know what our staffing is by the end of June. So it's a tight timeline this year. The city is 5 days late. They're going to be 5 days late of voting on their budget in order for us to have this information. But as soon as they vote, we'll be sending information out to the school board for them to consider. So shall I move on to the CARES Act? Any questions?
No.
Okay. The CARES Act. CARES Act funding is estimated at $2.9 million. We have a release date, actually, it just came in today. The release date, we have an application to fill out. Once the application is approved by the state, they will begin releasing funds to us, letting us have reimbursement. But it is due by August 1st at the latest. We do not plan to wait that long. We have too many things that we'd like to do with the money. So what we will have is a plan for the board in June, an application and plan for the board in June, so that we can then, after the board approves, then we can move on and get it to the state, hopefully for a July 1 release, so that we can move forward with the plan to use these funds. These funds have to be used by September 30th of 2022. However, they must be used for very specific purposes, as I'll show you in the next slides. So activities that are authorized by Title I, Title VI-B, Adult Ed and Family Literacy, C.A.R.E.S Perkins, McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Act, you have to use it for activities authorized by these federal funding sources only. You cannot go outside of anything that these different funds would not allow. So we have all those to consider. We can use it for activities to address.
Can you go back?
I'm sorry.
Can you go back to that?
Yes, ma'am.
So under the Adult Ed and Family Literacy Act, we can purchase equipment with that, right?
Correct.
So would that allow us to purchase technology for our folks at home when we're doing distance learning?
Yes.
Yes.
And part B of the idea, would that do some preschool stuff for us?
It will primarily do
Early
children with
childhood?
disabilities.
I'm sorry?
Primarily children with disabilities. Pre-K is a very small piece of that.
Right. With part B would be early childhood?
Yes, early childhood.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to ask about. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have to use it for activities to address unique needs of low-income students, children with disabilities, English language learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster youth care. So we can use activities for that. We can develop and implement procedures and systems to improve our preparedness and response efforts to pandemics and things like that, where we have to close schools. Training and professional development for staff on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infectious diseases. We can purchase supplies to sanitize and clean facilities. We can plan for, coordinate long-term how we're going to coordinate long-term closures and provide meals and technology for online learning, for IDEA guidance requirements, ensuring that educational services can continue to be provided consistent with applicable requirements. We can purchase educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity for students who are served by us that aids in the regular and substantive educational interactions between students and the classroom teachers, and provide mental health services and supports. We can also use it for planning and implementing activities related to summer learning, supplemental after-school programs, addressing the needs of students in those groups that we mentioned, providing principals and other school leaders with resources necessary to address school needs, and then other activities necessary to maintain our operations and continuity of services and continue to employ existing staff. That sounds like payroll, but it really is not. They are absolutely telling us that they will not allow it to go to payroll.
Correct.
Are there any questions about any of that? And again, all of those things that are listed after the Title I and 6B, it still has to be applicable to those programs. If you cannot get it approved under those programs, you cannot do it.
Listen, thank you. I just have a comment. Thank you. If I waited, you would have explained it. I was a bit excited about the money. Thank you.
So, you know, it sounds like it's real broad, but it isn't as broad as it seems.
Yeah, it's limited in its use. Thank you.
And Ms. Forsman, you said this money, the application process, you have to have that in by when?
Well, the deadline is August 1st, but we don't plan to wait that long.
Right, you're going to pursue it very quickly.
Yes, ma'am. We'd like to have it to the board by the June meeting.
Okay. And then once that is done, the money will be coming to us hopefully within a short period of time.
Well, what happens is you apply for reimbursement. You have to spend the money first, just like Title I and 6B, and then apply for reimbursement. But the money would be available for us to begin spending, we hope, right around July 1st.
Okay. July 1st.
Yeah, and they use Title I as the formula to help us determine how much each school division was going to be able to get. So Ms. Forsman is correct, but that's going to be the formula they're actually going to use for reimbursement. But we have some plans that I'm sure she's going to talk about in this presentation.
Yeah, I'm not going to really say any more about the plans for the CARES Act until we get them nailed down. We really are in just the preliminary stages. There's a group of us working on it, myself, John Littlefield, and Kim McGrath, who are all working on this application and pulling things together from all the different departments with Dr. Gordon's leadership. So we will have a complete plan ready for the board for the June meeting in order for the board to see everything that we'd like to do with these funds. There's lots of caveats on this, though. We believe we're still going to have a set aside for private schools. There's quite a bit to this that we still are working our way through. So we're going to take the next couple of weeks and really get that pulled together and get the application ready so that it can go to the board. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
All right. So then there are some other revenue considerations that are completely outside of the recommendation that we will bring to the board on the 26th. The reason that these are other is because we really don't have enough information to make changes to these yet, but we feel like it's important for the Finance Committee of the board to understand that these are items that are on our horizon and things that we've got to consider as we move forward into the new year and how do we plan to address them. So one downside of this entire thing is the state did not revise their sales tax projections for next year. Everyone knows they're going to be down, but they did not revise it as part of the budget process at the state level. Unfortunately for us, what that means is that if they don't collect it, we don't receive it, and the state doesn't make up the difference. So our budget has $18.3 million in it next year for sales tax, and that equates to about $1.5 million a month. If that revenue shortfall is 15%, and we're being told 10 to 15%, they believe, they're not even sure. If it's 15%, then that is a shortfall in the budget of $2.7 million. And again, the state does not make up this shortfall with general funds. In addition to that, as you know, they suspended the supplemental per pupil lottery funds this year. We're not sure if that's not going to continue next year. Excuse me. The approved budget has $3.3 million of this money in it for next year. But we don't have any information from the state at this time on whether they're going to continue that suspension or not. They are aware the lottery funds are going to be coming in less. They're aware of the downturn. I'm expecting that they're going to keep that suspension on until they have better numbers late fall, early spring of 2021. So this is another item that while we are not going to address as part of our adoption of the budget, we just need to be aware that it's out there, and be prudent in how we spend our money in the fall so that if that does come to fruition, that we're prepared. The two together run about $6.1 million of next year's money. So this is how we plan to address it. Dr. Gordon is working with the city manager, and the city manager is working with city council on potentially reappropriating any current year funding saved from not purchasing equipment and supplies into next year to make up for that sales tax shortfall. Again, we don't know how much this is going to be until we get further into this year end and until we get all final numbers, but it is a way for us to move money into next year from savings that we can find in current year, realizing already we're down $3 million in revenue. So if we have anything, trying to move that into next year to make up for some of that sales tax shortfall. We may have to, in the fall, put some spending and hiring freezes in place if things become significantly lower than the projections come in and they're coming in lower than we expected. And we're going to monitor the monthly economic impacts of reopening the country, the sales tax that they're collecting, and the monthly revenue reports from the lottery to make sure that we're on top of any place that we see where they're not collecting money. This would be how we would be looking at this 6.1 for next year and deciding what we should do. All right. Yes, ma'am.
One question I had with regard to hiring. I know that we ended the year with bus drivers that we didn't hire. We had vacancies. Did we have teaching vacancies as well?
Yes, we had over 30 teaching vacancies, and what we asked Dr. Brown to do was to roll those over for our July 1 hiring cycle. However, he did have a very successful job fair a couple of Saturdays ago, and we did hire some teachers there that also would come under our payroll starting July 1.
Okay.
And on those numbers, those last numbers I gave you for the sales tax and for the supplemental per pupil lottery for next year, we really won't know much before December how that's going to shake out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You just don't know until things get rolling again, until they open things up, and until lives return to somewhat normal, what these numbers are going to be. And so it really isn't prudent for us to jump the gun and start cutting things out of next year's budget and making plans until we get to next year.
Right.
Start really looking at it.
You have a question, Ms. Brown?
I was just going to ask, so for instance, we will proceed with the budget as we have listed it, say for school allocations and things like that. You know how usually we give money, is it in August?
Yes, ma'am.
That they receive their funding. Will we proceed with that as normal?
We will give 80% of the funding as we normally do in August so that they can open schools.
Okay.
The only way that would change is if we can't open schools.
Right. So a lot of this is still iffy, so to speak.
All of it. Yes, ma'am. All of it is iffy.
We are really
Shooting in the dark.
yeah, shooting in the dark. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. We can only go by what they're telling us at the state level about the March sales tax revenue and what they believe that last quarter of this year, which is April through June, are going to do. We really have no idea.
What's
You
going to
know,
happen?
we're relying on the state to give us that because we don't get to see the numbers that they're collecting. And again, we're 2 months later collecting that money, so we won't see the June sales tax collection until August.
And I was told this morning in our weekly conference call with the Department of Education that lottery proceeds for the month of April will be released on Friday. So that'll be our first indicator as a predictor of what lottery proceeds will look like also for May and June as well.
Right. But they won't be releasing, at least from what I understand, Dr. Gordon, they will not be releasing the per pupil supplementary funding of lottery.
That is correct.
Until they know they funded the other stuff, they won't release that money. So it would be a good indicator of the lottery funds overall, but we still won't know about that per pupil piece until we get to June.
That's correct.
And I don't know, Dr. Gordon, have you heard anything about next year with that? I think they're going to continue the suspension. They've really not said, but I do believe that they'll continue that because they won't know before the end of June what those what the lottery is really going to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Ms. Forsman. Some of the insight that we received is that information probably won't even come to the table until the state enters into phase 3. And with us looking at 10 to 12 weeks away from that, all 133 school divisions are basically planning for the worst case scenario, which is what Ms. Forsman and her team has done. We're taking our numbers on a very conservative approach here so that we can at least have an idea of what we can do. And we want to make sure that the board has opportunity to take a look at this. And I gotta reinforce what those dates that Ms. Forsman gave in her presentation earlier. With City Council voting on May 20th, our meeting on May 26th to adopt, those 2 dates are locked in to make sure that we have a proper amount of time to offer our contracts. We've also moved up when people are being released from Suffolk Public Schools to June 30th, because everyone's in the same boat of looking for staff members. However, some other school divisions, of course, have larger deficits, and so they just don't know. We want to make sure that we are being as proactive as we can to still emphasize that even though we can't give the original amount that we were proposing, that we can still give our staff something to close the gap. That's going to be really important. We'll go into that again, once we get into the June meeting. But to us, I really want to, publicly commend Ms. Forsman and her team for working with things. I'm sending her emails, text messages, we're having phone calls. As soon as I get information coming from the Department of Education, I forward it to Wendy immediately. When the C.A.R.E.S application just came out on Friday, they were already on top of it and already started it. And we know what our priorities are going to be, but before we make it public, we want to make sure that our numbers match up, since the state hasn't told us just yet, and because City Council hasn't voted yet. So we know that as we're planning for what learning is going to look like, that's going to be a huge proportion of what we're kind of envisioning for our students and for the school division.
And I want to say, Wendy, thank you, and to our staff. And since I know these meetings are streamed online, I want to say thank you all for keeping our staff. My biggest concern is to make sure that we keep the people that we have, the team that we have all over the system working, because it's critical at this time that we keep people employed, that we keep them working. And for anyone who has a concern about what we're doing and how we're keeping people working, our folks are pulling together. I talked with some teachers yesterday about the kinds of things that they're doing, going into their rooms as well as being online with their students and going into their classrooms, getting their things together. They're going through desks and finding glasses and all sorts of things that the kids have left, and making sure those things, the parents are notified, and making sure those things get to students. There are plenty of things for people to do, and we're keeping those people. So my big concern is to make sure our employees have jobs to come back to and that they're working right now. So I'm just grateful for that. And I'm thankful for those people who are on the Suffolk Public Schools team. So that's a blessing for me.
It surely is. And, Wendy, your staff, you're understaffed, I know. I've always said that. You do a remarkable job. You're always ahead of the game, so to speak, like Dr. Gordon said, and you're to be commended for that. And I know your staff works diligently. And for us to be able to keep things going, like Dr. Buck said, and keep our people employed is utmost concern for all of us.
I tell you all the time, Mrs. Byram, it is phenomenal staff. That is the only way this happens. The staff is phenomenal.
And we want to keep them all.
Yes, ma'am.
Cafeteria folks, custodians, everybody, we want to keep them.
That's
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Too much to be done to not keep folks. That's true.
That's right.
That
That's
is
right.
true.
So,
Do you all have any other questions for Ms. Forsman?
No.
No.
Thank you, Wendy. We really appreciate all your hard work.
all right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Be safe.
Is that it? Very good.
We got her act, you know.
Yeah, she's been on it because